Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting to order and acknowledge that we are in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu, Cree, and Dakota peoples, and in the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. My name is Lynn Nesbitt, and I will be chairing your panel today. Our secretary today is Jason Robertson. Other members of the panel are Bill Moretsky, joining us via Zoom, and Robert Upton, who's present in the committee room. And our assessor is Matthew Barocas. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the Board's order. With respect to the hearing process, I'll confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by the questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all of the evidence about an application have been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the Board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the Board's decision by registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. We will be hearing items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on our docket today. Mr. Robertson, please affirm the assessor's and the applicant's testimony.
Mr. Assessor, please state your full name.
Matthew Stephen Barocas.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hack.
I'm still having problems with the standing stuff. I don't want him to stand. Go ahead.
Please state your full name.
No.
Do you affirm that the evidence you are about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The first item on our docket today is 890 McMillan Avenue. Mr. Barocas, when you're ready, you can start us with that item.
Okay, great. Thank you. File number 22-2592, roll number 1202305 890 McMillan Avenue. It's an apartment for 2023 roll year. It's assessed at $1,460,000. Residential 2, only one income stream. It says it's built in 1913. We don't have any effective year on it to reflect any sort of extensive renovations. Only 2 outdoor apartments, plus 22 suites, construction class D, wood or steel frame exterior walls. Request for income information here. They've been good at submitting their stuff. Subject sale history. Don't have any recent sale history. Going on to page 3. Shows our modeled work up here. We've got 2 1-bedroom and the rest are 2 bedrooms. As you can see, average monthly rent $807.49. Their modeled parameters and our 6.25 cap generates our estimated market value of $1 million. $460,000. We've got rent comparables here on page 4. You see that we're falling within the lower end of the range on this property. Page 5 shows our capitalization rate evidence, the beginning of it. So hopefully some of you getting familiar with this. I know that's been seen a couple times. These are some sales that I compiled from the list we have. These are actual transactions. In the market, I took a 3-year stabilized look at them over the sale price and was able to calculate a cap rate. I do want to note one thing. There are 2 sales in this list that going forward we have removed, but it was beyond submission time. So those 2 sales are 1833 Pembina and 859 Grosvenor. I want you to cross those out, disregard them. Basically, you can see they sold on the same day. It was like a package sale. It was the same vendor and purchaser. Therefore, can't be, I guess, determined with certainty that considerations amongst both properties weren't completely separate. So those won't appear going forward. Just cross those out. So the remaining sales, we've got 3 that are under 5%, 1 that's under 4%, and then 3 that are above 5%, between 5 and 6%. So it represents a wide spectrum in relation to some of the cap rates you're going to see in the model. Not totally, but it's a wide range there. But again, 1833 Pembina, 859 Grosvenor, those ones are out. You won't see them going forward. Again, not meant to be comparable specific, just to substantiate and show that the model and the actual transactions are in parallel. Cap rate chart on page 6. You've seen this before. It just shows City of Winnipeg percentile here on the 5th row down, 2nd column over, between 4.8 and 5.6. So for this property, we're above that. We're at 6.25. It's an older property. We've got notes indicating that there are structural issues with the property as well. This is something that we've got notes on. The applicant, you'll see they have information, photographs in their brief that substantiate what I'm saying right now. So that's not anything that we're disputing. So page 7, Malta municipal assessment excerpts. Page 8, this is the most recent income and expense mailer for the property. You see that with its age and its foundation issues, they're still getting a net operating income reported of 100, and I believe that's 108, not 109, 108, 973 for net operating income. The City of Winnipeg is only at 91,000. We've got this knocked down as low as we can in our model of poor income quality to try and take into account these foundation issues that the applicant is probably going to be able to go into better detail than I have. So there's quite a delta in between what they're actually getting, foundation issues inclusive, and the net operating income. So, I mean, I didn't look for an increase, because if you were to bring the net operating income up to actual and coming up with the assessment, then you'd have to definitely adjust the cap rate upwards to address the foundation issues. But without any quotes or anything, I don't really have any solid ground to come up with a conclusion on that. So I just left it as is with a net operating income, I don't know, 60 and 17 grand below what they're actually collecting. So for that reason, I didn't make a change. The property is located corner of McMillan and Wentworth, 1 block east of Stafford. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barocas. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Second. I just wanted to find my reference. Just going to your comments about the structural issues, are you asserting that wait, back this up. How was the assessment prepared? Was this done by the model?
Yes.
Now you're suggesting that the NOI should be higher to reflect the structural issues, and as a balance to reflect the structural issues, you're going to use the model rent, or you're supporting the model rent, I should say, with the model cap. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, so we don't have any quotes or anything where we could kind of make some sort of deduction, lump sum deduction to the value. We know that there's structural issues with the property, that's not in dispute. So it's down as low as possible in our model. If we were to look at the normal, like the actual net operating income, I would definitely suggest boosting the cap up. We're much lower in comparison to what they're collecting with a lower cap. You can see the difficulty where I'm sitting right now because we're so low in comparison to what they're collecting. So that's all I can say about that, is that we're low on the NOI, but we know there's structural issues.
Now, when you say that you're lower at the NOI, did you do a comparison of maintenance and repair costs historically?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
In regard to the NOI, did you do a review of the maintenance costs over time?
No, I did not.
And sorry, I was looking at the wrong one here. For this particular period, what were the maintenance costs?
As reported on the most recent mailer, it was $28,033 for 22 suites.
Okay, and you're not aware that the previous mailer was at 47,000, and the one previous to that was at 82,000.
Oh, per unit?
No, just
no. Oh, a grand total. No, those are figures that are. I don't know the details in regards to what those repairs entail. I don't know if they're suite upgrades or their foundation stuff. But I didn't take a look. I'm just commenting.
So you don't know what they spent on personally. That's correct. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know what the breakdown of the historical R&M, because it's not in my evidence.
Okay, and was there, when you make a comment like that, shouldn't you first consider stabilizing the maintenance and repair to look at performance over time, especially considering your admission that you know that there's a structural issue? Yeah,
I get what you're saying there. You said 82,000, so on a per suite basis, that would be 3,727. Was there a breakdown of those historical repairs?
Well, I'm just reading. I have the file here, and I'm just reading the submissions over time. And the last time we appeared here on this property, the total maintenance repair was 42,600. The time before, it was 82,000. So you would have that in your files, would you not? Since they were all sent to the board.
Yeah, that would have been in our files.
Okay. So when you make a statement about perhaps having a higher NOI should lead, or a lower than NOI than the model should lead to some sort of a balance act on structural. Again, my original question, shouldn't you first have stabilized the maintenance and repair to determine if this was just happened to be a good year?
That's a fair comment. The 42,006 would have been 1936 a suite, which is for a property of this age is definitely reasonable. The 82,000, that's much higher. I would definitely want to see a breakdown. I don't know if they're doing suite upgrades. I wasn't able to find pictures on this property. It looks like our net op or we're pretty low compared to what their most recent statement said. So, sometimes you don't have the most time to get these things submitted. So I just saw it, I went with it. But stabilized, broken down would have definitely helped.
Well, I understand that, but don't you also in your notes have the assessor's comments from the inspection done?
I've seen comments in regards to past inspections many years ago in regards to the foundation issues, but I don't know about any potential recent suite upgrades, whether they've happened or not. I just looked at the most recent mailer, if that's what you're trying to nail down.
Okay, so you did you review the decision history on this property, and not asking about values, not asking about decisions, what the number was. I'm asking if you've read the decisions and the comments that were on the last 4 decisions.
Well, I know that the panel doesn't consider past decisions, and so I didn't take a look.
That's been a statement of fact I'm asking about.
No, I didn't look at the past decisions. The panel doesn't consider those.
So I have them in front of me, and you're not then aware that I'm going to just read these facts, not the numbers. Decision is to better.
Mr. Neufeld, you could perhaps raise that in your evidence, but it's not something that Mr. Brokus. Thank you. Do you have any other additional questions of Mr. Brokus?
I have a fair number of them.
Thank you.
And I just want the applicant to get his money's worth on his appeal fees today. So we'll go long on the first one and shorter on the following ones. When the model is made, I take it that you're not involved with that process?
That's correct.
And do you know the methodology they follow? Do they verify? Or what are the verification steps?
I'm not involved in the modeling process.
Okay. And the workups that were done on page 5 in support, did you prepare these?
Yeah, that was me. That's not the model.
Okay. And what were the steps you took in verification?
Well, we've got parts in our system that have a section where sales of properties are listed. We've got staff that go and review sales to see their applicability. Because sometimes, so we're going on the same stream here. Sometimes sales aren't exactly arm's length, or they need to be excluded. Like Pembina, Rosner, they're between related parties. If we have evidence of that, so that sort of stuff is reviewed. Company searches are done in order to see if parties are related. If sale price per suites look out of whack, in consideration to what we typically see. So these are all steps that I undertook. I also look at the mailers to see, like the properties appearing on this list, all have multi-year mailers leading up to the sale date. So if a property doesn't have mailers or it's missing a mailer, like on the way up to the sale date, I wouldn't consider it for this chart because I don't want to be misleading and I don't want to put out a chart that has cap rates that aren't accurate. That's not my intention. So reviewing that information, there's a sales mailer, I'll look at that. More often than not, it's not returned. But on that sales mailer, it will say it was the transaction. The purchaser will self-declare was the property purchased for its NOI. Sometimes, about 50% of the time, they just leave that blank. What cap rate did they use? Often just left blank. Sometimes people fill it completely out. But like based on the information available, I make a determination of whether or not the sale was arm's length and reflects a normal market transaction, and then using a 3-year stabilized on the reported income and expenses and a known sale price, come up with a capitalization rate.
Well, so in other words, your methodology involves looking at the mailers and title transactions. Do you follow up with any sort of further investigation, either in person, telephone, contacting vendors, purchasers, people involved with the sale?
That's not something I did for this trip.
Okay. Now, when there's an unusual situation, do you or the department have any sort of a specialized questionnaire that goes out for follow-up?
Can you maybe define what you mean by unusual situation?
Well, sure. Sales involving government agencies, charitable institutions, financial institutions, relatives, estates, judicial orders, doubtful titles, relatives, corporate affiliates, estates, partial interests, investors, investments by large property owners, multiple parcel sales. I'm just reading from the IDO.
Yeah. Okay. I know what you're saying. Like if we can see that, and those are, like if it's an estate sale or it's a family selling to part of a family, that's not a sale I would include in the chart. We want it to be arm's length. There's no intention here to be misleading.
No, I don't. I'm not questioning integrity at all. I'm questioning the methodology that the department employs. And you asked now estate sales, they're clearly stated on titles, so you know not to use those, right?
They can be, you can see by the last name, it often says in the transaction estate of so-and-so to someone else. But to go back to your question, we don't have like a follow-up super mailer to send the vendor with more information. This chart is, I want to circle back that this chart is something that, this is independent research that I did. This is not something that has driven the model in any sort of way. This is just like market evidence I collected. So I just want to make sure that distinction is clear for the panel.
Right, and when you peruse the income and expense forms, for example, if you were looking at the second one, 510 Burnell, you have a sale date of September 4th, 2020. Which sales flyer would you, brochure or mailer would you be reading? Or which income mailer would you be reading?
Well, that would be the 2019. I look at the most complete year before the year the sale took place in, because I wouldn't use partial year income and make some sort of multiplier.
Okay, but it is an older mailer that's generally. Definitely. And what fiscal year would it be? Would it be for the calendar year or a fiscal year in 2019?
January, it would be like December 31st. That's how they get reported to us. Mostly, sometimes government agencies or not-for-profits will do March, full year March 31st. And if that works prior to the sale date, the most complete year prior to the sale date. Yeah.
It can be a fiscal year ending in October the previous year, could it not?
I don't think I've seen October. It's usually end of December or end of March if it's like a not-for-profit or something.
Oh, okay. But again, do you think that you have no knowledge then if the modelers follow the same process you do?
No, I'm not involved in the model. I just tried to come up with evidence to see what the actual market transactions said as support. Because oftentimes we come in here and we get asked by the applicant or told by the panel, like, well, you just say, oh, it's the model. But I tried to take it a step further here and come up with actual sales.
In the case I was mentioning, the IAAO, is it correct to state that the city assessor belongs to the Manitoba assessment officers who follow IAAO procedures? Is that a fair statement?
I don't know that.
Okay. It's on their website.
Okay. Yeah, I should probably go to that website, but anyway, continue.
Now, was it just me who told you about 1833 Pembina and Grosvenor being a portfolio sale, or have you heard it from other people?
No, we heard it from Altus too, and I've already amended this chart and redistributed to our staff. So any evidence that's been submitted prior to that, we'll have these, but going forward, they won't be there, and I've told them to address it like I did in my presentation. So that's something that's not our intention to do. We don't want to be misleading. It was brought up by the applicants. Fair point. Missed that. Thank you for bringing it up. It's no longer going to be in our evidence.
And again, I respect your integrity. I know we were talking about 510 Burnell, and I'm glad that you listen. Know that you're listening. So don't take this the wrong way.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
Yes, you mentioned foundation problems. How are these reflected? Is there water in the basement, or what is the cause? What is the result of the foundation problems?
I know this property was inspected by another member of our staff some years ago before I was in the multifamily department. The notes that I read indicated that there was significant shifting. It is an older property. It's over 100 years old. I know the applicant has some pictures in their evidence, and they might actually be able to answer that question better than I can. But it's visibly evident from the exterior. But the interior results, I don't know. I haven't been in it. I haven't seen any interior pictures.
But the vacancy rate of 4.2%, is that just a model number, or is that an actual number for this property?
That's the valuation is modeled.
The model?
Yeah.
So you don't know what the vacancy rate is in the building?
Well,
it's high because of these foundation issues. Are there suites in the basement, for example?
I mean, looking at the mailer on page 10, they are reporting gross potential suite income at 100% occupancy at 279,504. Then they're reporting that they are collecting 243,454. So I don't know. Sometimes they report the gross potential prior to discounts if they exist. I don't know if discounts exist. So I was just looking at it from an effective gross income standpoint, and most notably only a 1 year net operating income consideration. I haven't inspected the property. I actually don't know if there's suites in the basement or not. Perhaps they
have not inspected it.
Yeah.
And the cap rate, you got a 6.25. How did you select the 6.25?
Okay. Oh, yeah. So that was just done by the model based on its location, its characteristics in our database.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Upton. Mr. Moretsky, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just going to the page where they disclose their expenses. I think that's page 8. So it appears that that the owner pays all of the utilities in this building. Is that correct?
It appears that, I'm not sure. I don't think they pay hydro. That hydro amount's way too low.
Yeah, so that's kind of low then, 1882 then, right? So that's not really for the suites. It's some kind of common thing that they take care of probably.
Yeah, if you go to page 10, actually, of the mailer, for services, about middle of the way down there,
Yeah,
heat, water, and appliances are included.
included in the rent. Okay, and your comparables though, they where are they? They're back there on page 5.
Yes.
So that was the sales. That was your sales though, right?
Oh, sorry, page 4.
Page. Yes, that's the one. That's the one. Okay. Well, their heat is included in their rent on those rent amounts on the comparables, correct?
That's what it indicates, yes.
So just without me having to, well, anybody having to look back, do you know approximately what percentage of those rents would be the heat?
I don't have any way of calculating that.
Okay, but then we could probably allow for it based on what the this subject has disclosed, correct? Which is $223,829 a year for the heat.
Yeah, that's what they included. In regards to the potential, like they say they collected 243,454.
Yeah.
The model effective gross income is 204,224. So I didn't really put much time into coming up with the comparables. They're just meant to show that there's other properties in the area renting for similar amounts.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples on those rent values. The rent per month for the suite, that it's apples to apples.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's been covered. You covered it in your presentation, and then Bob also alluded to it. But I was just wondering if you could just summarize very briefly how you factored in, again, those foundation repairs into your valuation.
Well, we don't have any data in regards to cost to cure in the form of quotes or anything like that. This is a model valuation, but we do know that there has been ongoing foundation issues. They're evident from exterior photographs, and there's been inspections in the past. So how the city, in an attempt to take this into consideration, just simply dropped it as low as possible in our income quality, which drives the level of income and expenses that are assigned to the property. So for the area modeled, it would get assigned, it would get pushed into the bucket with where, based on its characteristics, it would generate the lowest market rents and a higher expense ratio based on its characteristics, again, because we don't have any cost to cure that we could use as an estimate. Like, we have nothing. So we just set it as low as possible in the computer system. And that's how the value was produced. And as a result, we're about 16,000 low on the net operating income compared to what they most recently reported.
Okay, so you're saying that's what you did. You just pushed that NOI lower because of those foundation repairs.
That's That's
I know.
what was done by.
What about the cap rate? That didn't have anything to do with the foundation repairs?
Well, the cap rate was done by the model, and I can see your thought process, kind of where it's going here. It's difficult because we really don't have data. We can see that there's foundation repairs, but we don't have like a dollar amount extent on it. I mean, if the net operating income was similar to what they most recently reported, then yeah, you'd probably be adjusting the cap rate higher. You still might be adjusting the cap rate higher as is, but it's really, I hope you can understand the difficulty that I'm in. I don't really have a handle I can base analysis off of here.
Well, I just want to know what you did. That's all.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just how
Yeah.
you can do it, but I just don't want to know what you did. That's all.
It was just in income quality poor in our model, and then the model created the valuation.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Moretsky. And I have no questions. So Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed with your presentation.
Okay. I wanted to go through some rebuttal as well. When
Mr. Moretsky or Mr. Neufeld will do that after your presentation, okay?
was that going to ask you? Yes, that's fine. Okay. The property has a chronic foundation problem, and on page 1, there's an overhead picture. So the same owner owns the 3 houses to the left side as well, and if you drive past the street, you'll see that we've got it looks like a cartoon picture with houses leaning every which way. As it impacts the subject property, the eastern wing is collapsing, and there's this is what's the name? I guess you call this crescent wood. Most people who live in the city know about the silt that runs through this area. It's notorious for a silt river, and it's going to be based on how deep you go on your original construction. If you go under the silt to underpin, or you pile under it, and if you don't, you're going to be faced with movement problems in this neighborhood. And they've affected the property for as long as I've been involved with it, which dates back to 2005, 2004. The manifestation is on the exterior. The pictures I've shown on pages 2 to 6, and the contrast is poor, but what you'll see is cracks running down the entire side of it. The best picture is on the top of page 5, where you can see that there's a header that's crooked, and that's where the sag is. One of the sags has occurred. Inside the units, there are basement suites, and the ramp, the incline caused by this ranges from 6 to 12 inches within the units. And what the remedy has been over the years has been to create a subfloor to provide a level surface. But we are dealing with a moving target because the shifting continues to occur. And it broadens and affects more parts of it. So over the years, where this has impacted income, as you heard in my questioning, we've seen repairs and maintenance zoom to 82,000 in a year, where more intensive subfloors and repairs in door frames. What they've been doing is removing the door frames, reshimming, and putting them in straight. And there are plumbing issues as well. And you'll note that the building has steam heat. So one of the things that they're constantly doing is repiping the steam as the shifting occurs. It's just a fact of life. This is not a repairable problem with a foundation, with a stone foundation. This is demolition, or continue using it until such time as you can't work with it. The fluctuations that occurred in revenue and expenses are twofold. One is the repairs and maintenance, which, as you heard, range from 20,000 to 80,000. Now, normally we would stabilize those and give you an average number. And the other fluctuation are revenue, because when they have to repair the basement units, they have to vacate them for the repair process. So the income goes up and down. Both of those are factors. When we looked at stabilizing it, we came up with a number that was very, very close to what the assessor had. And our decision was, rather than debate these matters, we would just accept their number just to be a bit more expeditious in the hearings. But when I heard the assessor's comments about using one to balance off the other, I just disagreed with it. And that's why I'm giving you this explanation. That's not how it should be dealt with. Where a chronic problem like this is dealt with is in the capitalization rate. And the reason is simple. A capitalization rate is anticipation of future income, not a method of stabilizing past performance. So an investor who's going to buy this is looking at it and saying, this thing's got a pretty short, this thing has a shorter shelf life than most products on the market. They will respond with it on the basis of a higher capitalization rate. And I would suspect that potential purchasers would look at this as a future demolition project at some point down the road, because it's really not repairable, economically repairable. And of course, 1913 construction, it's going to be very difficult to get a demolition permit until there is a complete failure. So these are the thoughts that would go through an investor's mind. And in the past, and these, the past 4 board orders I have sitting in front of me state that there was recognition of the property's foundation issues, and without getting into numbers, that's all I want to read into the record is just to let you know what he said, not the numbers. Better reflect the current physical condition of the subject. Recognize the building's ongoing foundation and structural issues and the building's age. This one said nothing, and well, that's before we had the comments in. But the point is that the board recognized it, and it was a capitalization rate adjustment that was applied. The income goes up and down. I think it's stabilized right with the number the assessor has. We just have to think down the road about how you would capitalize it. And I don't think anybody has really heard our position on cap rates, so I just want to go through it a little bit clearer. Now, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen an awful lot of what I would call very strange cap rates. And upon analysis, they tend to be rates that were based on anticipation of a future benefit, not income and expenses. So our concern, not my concern, I'm speaking, I didn't make any of this up. Colliers International has said we have to return to our basics. Why do people need a cap rate? It's simple. They need it to borrow money, and the bank has an idea of the performance that the property is capable of doing. So on page 25 is the Colliers cap rate report. On page 27 shows you the new basis of our reliance. Now, we still review capitalization rate sales. We don't ignore them, but we now test them. And anything that does not perform to the satisfaction of the investment side is not considered a cap rate. It's not an investment sale. It's a sale for a different reason. We can't just assume that a number comes out and that it is market. So the test is on page 27. Look at the spread to interest rates. And you can see that we have about a 400 basis point spread or 4 percentage points over the typical cap rate and the bond rate And then between that and the mortgage rate, there's about a 3-point spread. And that's one of our tests. And what we're doing falls completely in line with bank policy, as well as when I get into rebuttal. Then on page 28 this is the Winnipeg rates, and it's between 5 and 6%. Page 29 shows the definitions for those rates. And you'll note that under multifamily, the low rise talks about lower density multifamily residential buildings, typically comprising 4 stories or fewer, with or without elevators, concrete or wood frame construction, surface parking with few building amenities. That does not consider the subject property. It's not investment grade, which means it's going to be above our rates. Now, our rates are not model driven. They're driven by a whole variety of factors. We have hundreds of analysts across the country looking at sales, and then we compare them to the standard of what the financial side. Most multifamily sales handled by colliers are done by the investment team. And those are the numbers that they have to rely on. So we're not buying 3s and 4s because they don't exist. Those are sold for a different reason. On page 32 is another report that we came out with, which backs up the cap rate report. We are now doing debt advisory services. And this is analysis. This is the source material for the cap rate spread. You'll notice the chart on page 33 is the same one referenced in the cap rate report. This is our new double check. So a direct capitalization rate is, I'm going to use the word dormant, possibly or more reviewed. We have to separate the sales that don't meet the definition of market value from those that do. Now we are for this. This is about only the 3rd appeal that I've had on multifamily, and we were a bit slow off the mark. We only have one actual direct comparison, and that was on page 9, and that was the Superior building at 5.49%. You're going to see more in the future, and you'll see some in rebuttal, which are pertinent and follow the rules of evidence, and there's some in there that we're not going to talk about, so we don't have to worry about that. But they're just our work in progress. Now, when we take these cap rates, then we take a look at the Colliers standards, and again, these were derived by the same company, by the valuation division. The first ones I talked about came mostly from investment sales brokerage, people who are actually doing the deals. They're not reading questionnaires, they're talking to the vendors and the purchasers. So these are happening, these meet the definition of market value. Page 24 are the appraiser's notes. And these are the 23 points I always discuss. And I'm just trying to give you a bit more indication of what they refer to in the market. And there's a description as to what we would consider. Going to page 2 are the same 23 points. And here we've assigned numerical values. These numerical values were published by me in consultation with our appraisers across the country and our investment people in Winnipeg. What is the weight you would assign to each of these factors? So,
sorry, what page are you? Or sorry, Mr.
Page 2.
Page 2.
Yeah. So when we look at page 2, the important thing to remember about this is that even if you disagree with the weight, at least you have the ability to look at a transparent analysis and make up your own mind. And yes, it is completely the opposite of the city's mystery modeling, which we've never seen. who said the comment about me being here longer, all that time, never seen the model, heard about it, never seen it. And you know, that's not right. Under the Act, we have the concept of the burden of proof. The burden of proof is not to present a mystery model without the people doing it, who can explain it and show you how it's done so the board can make an informed decision. I presented this because I want you to make an informed decision. If you disagree with me, you can adjust and do it with math instead of guessing. So the points we're considering here is the third point down are closing costs. And I think you've heard this before, is that the Collier's cap rate model includes closing costs. So what they'll do is they'll put in the commissions and the, in Manitoba, the land transfer tax, add it to the sale price, which artificially bumps the cap lower. That's their style. So we have to make it the appraisal style, the assessment style. So that's the first adjustment. And then going down to the parking, well, there's no parking. It's cordon. What this really means, it's going to appeal to a different socioeconomic class without vehicles or scrambling for street parking. It puts it's a limitation on your ability to get rents if you don't have parking. You have parking, you can get higher rents. Building size not optimal. We like to see 30 plus units in the building because it spreads expenses. For example, if you have a repair of a single item, a fixed cost, in this case, fixing the floor. If you had 50 units to spread the expense, as the assessor pointed out, you would have a lower number per unit. If you only have 22 units, it's a smaller number to spread it over. It just makes it less profitable. It's a factor. The year build, of course, it's a 0, 1913. Condition, a 0 because of the foundation. And income growth potential, half a modification because there is no income growth potential. The tenant strength, again, is impacted by this because now we're dealing with, we're not dealing with a building that's going to have a long history. And income stability, I think you've already heard that today, 80,000 one year, 27,000 the next. Who's buying that? Investors are not giving gifts to people. They're going to hit that hard on the investment side. So our calculation was 8.77%, which comes out to $1,043,000, which is slightly higher than the 2020 assessment. And I know we don't compare assessments, but in this case, the decisions were based on physical issues, not market conditions. And those physical issues have not gotten better over time. And the building will always be impacted by this. That is the scope of my presentation, and I'll let you tell me whatever I'm supposed to do next. Questions or rebuttal?
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Barocas, do you have any questions of Mr. Neufeld?
Yeah, just a couple. Were you the one who made this brief?
No.
Okay. So I just noticed when we can get everyone to turn to page 8, please, of the brief, where it shows the mailer that was included. This mailer shows that it's for 915 Corden, and I mean that's where it says 89,566. So I'm just curious, do you know for certain if the person who created this brief reviewed the correct mailers or not?
Yes, I know he did. I remember discussing it with him, and we looked at the folder on our, well, we have all the mailers over the past decade, and we looked over it, and we looked at the, as I mentioned earlier, I suggested that we either stabilize it and come up with close to the same number or use the assessor's number. And I told the person who did it, my preference would be just use the assessor's number because there's less arguing at the board. This insertion was obviously a typo. And now I have to look at 915 to see if we put in 890s and 915. Did you check that?
I haven't gotten that far.
We can check that one when we get to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It wasn't a consideration, the mailer. We know this property quite well. And he prepared the same workup last year. We've gone over the same ground in previous years. This is a different style of building.
Okay, so just further to that, you mentioned the repair and maintenance being $89,000 in a particular year. This mailer is where that's coming from?
Yeah, that's all mailer information. I was just going through I have the appeals going back to I think 2008 right here. So I just quickly glanced at the mailers. I think I was speaking on 15, 16, 17 mailers.
Oh, okay.
On previous years.
Okay. I'm fair enough. So looking at, just to be clear, on page 2, you have your, maybe I'll say that. Have you been inside this property lately?
Yes, it was, I think I was there with Mr. Lucky, and I don't recall which year it was, because I know he was the assessor for 3 of these appeals, and I know he and I visited the property. I don't remember when.
Okay. Do you have any interior photographs we could take a look at to show some of the damage we've been talking about?
I think Mr. Lucky had some. This is why I still have paper files, not computer.
If he does have photos of it, that evidence hasn't been submitted, so it's not readily available for the panel viewing at the moment, we would have to recess and determine it.
Okay, I'll keep going.
Okay, to answer your question then, I believe the assessor has photos that Mr. Lucky took. I believe you should have them in your files.
Oh. I'd ask Rob, but he's retired. Let's see. I have his number. I'll text him. So
he remembers it well. Don't worry.
Yeah. Okay. So for the cap rate chart here on page 2, just to clarify, you've got a bunch of rows, optimal, subject, reason. Is this a system that you came up with, or is this out of like a textbook or anything like that?
Well, the origins of it, I don't know when the origins happened. I joined Colliers in 2008, and they employed the 23-point cap rating system. And what it was is inferior, superior, similar rating. So it was quantitative. So our VP of valuation, Chris Marlin, we had a meeting with him and several of the evaluators across the country, and I remember now it was in Kelowna. And on the agenda was this concept of going to a quantitative analysis or more detailed way of finding a cap rate. And the idea was that anytime we're involved in litigation, running across this issue where, are we just dealing with somebody's opinion? If you thought differently, I mean, at least give the person the opportunity to see how we did it. And what often happens is if you look at this cap rate model and say, just for sake of argument, this is what I was bringing forward. If someone disagreed with me on the building size, then they would say, no, I don't buy that. But you know what? I buy the parking and I buy the other problems. Then one could say, that makes a 2-point change in the rating system, and in this case would lower the cap to about 8.65%. And that's the sort of clarity we were looking for. So I circulated a paper to the group and got responses, and we came up with this weighting system. And that was probably in and around 2010, 2011, that we came up with this.
Okay.
They apparently, I do have some ranking at Colliers. I am some sort of managing director. I don't know what it really means, but I'm somewhere in the higher ranking of the echelon in evaluation nationally.
Okay, sounds good. For your valuation, you're relying on, instead of a direct sales method, you're relying on a more interest rate investment type methodology to come up with cap rates. Is that a correct statement?
Partially. I mean, I think you're referring back to the last time we met, and at that I said we're doing a work in progress. I normally don't get started till October most years because my schedule, I'm usually booked in the beginning of September for usually there's expropriation hearings, so I never start till then. So we didn't get started on our workups this year. So you're going to see the actual comparables coming out. And in the beginning, and they fully support what we're talking about. But the concept is you have to use the rating system or a rate driven by bank by mortgage rates to vet out the stupid deals. And it's really simple. When you buy your house, you don't go to the bank and buy whatever you want and tell the bank to give you the money. The bank asks how much you make, how much of a mortgage you can pay. It's the same for an apartment. You can't pay it with the proceeds from your revenue, you don't get a mortgage. And the concept of people, would they walk around with a lot of cash and buy any property regardless of the return? If they do, it's not an investment sale. It's not for us to consider for Reliance to apply to other properties. Those are anomalies. And that's what we're trying to weed out is just, we would like our work to follow what the financing people need.
Okay. And just one more question. Are you aware of any other applicant appearing before the Board of Revision that's utilizing this methodology for cap?
Well, see, now you asked me that question before the last time we met, and I was a little taken aback by it. But I can't be responsible for what other people say. You can't rely on their evidence for what they present to this board, and the board can't consider it. We're dealing with the information that's being put in front of us. And just to put it very short, Colliers sells these things. And we manage them. And we value them. And if you had somebody here who actually spoke to the vendors, maybe that should carry some weight. You'll see in the rebuttal. Oh, that was quiet. You'll see in the rebuttal, we talk to the people. We know them. We verify. That's our difference.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
Has this property ever been put up for sale? Are they interested in selling this property? Are they
This is
marketing this property?
They probably own this since new.
I mean,
They probably owned this property since new. The company was founded in 1912, and I think they've owned it since it was new. Family, and every generation just takes over. So they buy, they don't sell.
so they're satisfied with the income, obviously, that they're receiving from this property.
Well, no, of course not. But there are no alternatives at this point, except there are none. Years ago, they had repair estimates done for the foundation, and they were 7 figures, and they made no sense. They can't demolish it because it'll have to pass through heritage unless it's condemned. And so they bought the 3 houses next door for that actual purpose. The concept was to, this one was decaying. We could take that one and the 3 houses next door and build a new block there. But what happened in between is that the city bylaw on demolition of housing came into account, and then you also have the heritage. So that idea is gone. So I think right now they're looking at, let's maximize our income on this property for as long as we can. And when fate takes over, we'll be ready for it.
Okay, thank you. No questions further than that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moratsky?
Has there ever been an engineering assessment on the building, and specifically, I guess, the foundation issues, where they would have estimated the lifespan of these buildings?
I know they've had engineering reports. I don't have them. I spoke to ownership, and they summarized it as I've summarized to you. It's a year-by-year basis, and I think the next step would likely be, do they close off parts of that east wing that can't be rentable? But no, multifamily ownership is just bound by so many regulations these days that they're in a situation where they have to, if something happens in a major way, then they can act. But I think that was what the engineers eventually summed up. I keep remembering this story somebody told me about an old car. It smokes, but it's old enough, and old buildings lean, but you just keep using them.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moratsky, and I have no questions. Now, on the issue of rebuttal, Mr. Robertson, do we have rebuttal evidence submitted for this property?
No, at the moment we do not. Mr. Neufeld, you sent items for rebuttal in your emails. It was listed as items for 915 Courtney, as well as item for 223 Nassau Street. Are these items applicable to
the one read on that email beside 223 Nassau? It says et al. Right after that.
At all? Okay, then
which is Latin for all the rest of it.
Yeah, so then that will be my mistake. It's currently listed for you guys as item number 8, Nassau Street rebuttal applicant cap. That's the one we're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. I've mailed that out to the assessor now as well.
Okay.
The assessor has a copy of it.
Yeah. Mr. Brokus, you have a copy?
Yeah, I have copies of the stuff.
Okay, then Mr. Neufeld, you can proceed. And I'm just being cognizant of the time. We've been an hour and a quarter on this one property, and we still have 7 more to go. So just so people are aware, not trying to rush anyone, just being aware.
Yeah, I think we're going to go through this, and then we can refer to it. We're not going to go over it again and again for every other property.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Neufeld.
Now, I apologize, I don't have page numbers. This is a work in progress, and the next time you see it, there are more changes happening. What I was trying to bring out here is the failure of the model to understand the relationship between financing and cap rates. And in the top is a graph just showing the history, shows you my source data. And then in the middle is a graph that simply shows, based on different mortgages and different rates, how much money, what is your return required just to pay your loan. And no matter what you pick, you have to spend at least 5% of your income to pay back your loan, which means that traditional lending does not allow a sub 5 cap rate, not allow anything below 5.1. And that's if you want to make zero return. That's just a common sense check. The next few pages have to do with getting approval for mortgages. Now, at the bottom is talks about the stress rate test. Now, this is a residential publication from Government of Canada, but this is used in commercial lending. The stress test is to qualify, you have to be able to pay 2 points above the rate. The second, third, fourth, fifth page are just from various lenders, including BDC, and I've bolded the main points on those pages. You must have cash available to the required loan payment. Criteria number 1 to get a commercial loan. So if someone comes and tells you that I got a 3% cap rate, it's not market. It's called creative financing or anticipation, or buying for anticipation of an event down in the future. It's not an investment sale. And that definition is on the 4th page, creative financing. Now, one of the methods by which people get lower rates is CMHC, and that's on the 4th page in the middle. And those are the requirements you need to get CMHC financing. And there are financial requirements, there are experience requirements, for example, 5 years of multi-unit management experience, net worth, and capable of generating up to 100% of the loan until you have 12 months of stable rent. What that means is, with the CMHC, you can get a lower rate and there's a fee for it. And you'll see later on where I'll show you how favorable financing worked in one particular instance of the assessor's comps. The 5th page is the definition of value under the Municipal Assessment Act. You know, it's market. It's not hypothetical value. There's a section there on expenses, and it never came up today, but it might come up later. There was a debate at a few previous hearings about expenses incurred to appeal your property tax, and some comments that they shouldn't be considered as expenses, and that's completely untrue. Essentially, anything that impacts the revenue stream is an expense that has to be considered. Now, an example, if you hired a lawyer or an appraiser to sell your property and be involved in it, that can't be expensed on the statement. But if you had to hire one because you had a dispute with a tenant, that goes in there. Or if you had one to reduce your taxes or to make a grant application to Residential Tenancies Branch, those impact your expenses. So those are considered. It's just common sense. The test is, will it impact your revenue or expenses? And if we get into that later, the idea is that if you're going to save taxes by appealing them, then it's an expense. The next page is a summary of the assessor's sales, and I'll so that's the summary page. The first one is 2390 McPhillips. I was able to eventually find this sale at through the instrument number that Mr. Barak supplied me. It wasn't in our normal database, and I'm in the middle of reviewing it. So this is a work in progress. Essentially, the property sold from Ranjoy, which is the Gauthier family, to an investment company called Skyline REIT. And Skyline REIT on 10th page shows that their annual yield target is 4.15%. That's a REIT. Now, considering this, going to a further page, and I'll just read it to you now, and we'll get up there, and then you can see where it is, unless you want me to wait. But so I want to speed up here. The section 5.5 of the IAAO standard and verification says acquisitions or divestments by large corporations, pension funds, or REITs that involve multiple parcels typically should not be considered for analysis. So what this tells you is that if you're going to include this property in, there's a higher degree of verification required. And you heard that this was not done. So this requires you to contact the REIT, contact Mr. Gauthier, and verify the sale and find out if it was anything else to it. So you don't meet the standard, it's not reliable. The next property, 700 St. Mary's, I was hoping to have something by this morning. It was a sale from Shirley, which are the Schlamp family, to Tyler and I forgot her, Tracy Friesen. Now, in my analysis, I found that these the Friesens were Winkler dwellers, and the Schlamps had some other dealings with the Friesens in Winkler, and I found the court registration for it, and I'm waiting for the call back from the principals involved in that. And just for the record, it's CI 15019763. Also the Friesens. Now, lots of people are Friesens in Winkler. My mom was one from Schoenweiss nearby. But but I know some of these people personally from past events. So I felt that there was enough concern there that it had to be verified, because the numbers don't match reality. Nobody's buying 3% caps. And I just want to let you know it's a work in progress. Maybe the next time Mr. Brax and I meet, we'll have more. The next one is 510 Burnell. So this property, and I'm referring to the page that's this is a Collier's conventional financing valuation pro forma. So Collier's represented the vendor in the purchase, the purchaser in the purchase. The vendor was a related party by company transactions. So going back to the IAAO, it doesn't say you can't use the sales. It says you need additional verification. So when the assessor says he doesn't have it, I don't think you can consider his numbers reliable. So what I did is I went to the purchaser, Dave Ross of Smith Agency, and the person that supplied this was Brian Talio at Colliers, who handled the deal. This was Brian's workup. And the points, the things I want to show you there is, first of all, under investment summary, you'll notice that there's a purchase price listed, and I'm sorry, the numbers aren't clear. But the top number is the number that the assessor has reported at $2,813,000. And then they added deferred maintenance and land transfer tax and came with an adjusted value to $2,891,000. So that's what they used to calculate the Collier's cap rate. So when I tell you about closing costs, that's just one of those examples of how we do cap rates. Their analysis on this is at sorry, I'm just looking for the number here. Their calculation on this basis was 5.2%, and that's in the purple. So the assessor is telling you that it was 4.54. The people handling the sale said it was 5.2, and there's more to come on that number. The differences are, when I was asking the assessor about what did you use, so in this case, the 2019 actuals were given there. And you'll note that there are two very, very interesting changes. One is to the expenses and the other is to the income. What this shows, and you know, next time I bring this, I'm going to have this a lot bigger. We had expenses, repairs and maintenance over the history at $82,000 one year, $46,000 the next, yet it was stabilized at $28,000. When I look back and I put in those mailers on the following pages, and they showed you the expenses over time, that one year was $165,000, 1 year $166,000. This is, the analogy is simple. If you're selling something, you fix it up to make it prettier because you'll get a better dollar for it than if you're selling it wrecked. Now, when you fix it up in the apartment world, you then go to the residential tenancies branch and get an above guideline increase. And once it's approved, it'll be next year's income. At the time of sale, they knew that that amount was not $270,000, it was going to be over $300,000. So the vendor and the purchaser at time of transaction knew that the number was changing. And that's one of the biggest flaws in the assessor's workup, is that if you talk to people, you find out how you made a deal. We're not doing forensic analysis. We're doing what was in the buyer's and seller's mind on the date of the purchase. And in their mind, on this particular workup, they were at 5.2% using the Collier's method. And this highlights the difference between the major flaw in the model that the assessor uses. The after the income and expense mailers, their page talks about the adjustments, and I've given you a indication of what the expenses were over time. 2015 was a new roof. I don't have the number. 165,000, 25,000, 82,000, 46,000. The sale, they used 28,000. The income, 246, 277. And the sale, they used 302,000 as their RTV number and 285 as the actual annualized cash at time of sale. Now, the difference between the two is that they're waiting for leases to expire before they can enact the RTV above guideline increase. And you know it's an above guideline increase because it's up 22% over 4 years in a time when guidelines were 1.5 and last year was 0. So this is what happens in the real world, is that the numbers change. So the number was capped at using the $285,000 number, but there's an upside that the purchaser knew that it was going to go to $302,000 the following year. So that gave him motivation to accept that lower rate. Now, when the cap is adjusted, for the following page shows my adjustments, and the top calculation shows the difference between using the broker sale price and the actual sale price. The 5.2 is actually 5.36%. Now, the most interesting thing about this property is we have the best indication of favorable financing, which is not market value. It's called creative financing, because not everybody can get it. On the sales sheet you looked at, the left side of it shows the typical expected interest rate, which is difficult to read, but it's 3.25% on a 25-year amortization period, 5-year terms. The actual financing that was procured through CMHC was at 1.95%. And the term was the same, ratio was the same, and because it's CMHC, this goes not just through the 5-year term, but through the entire amortization schedule. There's always preferential financing in place whenever that might be. The textbook theory on my adjustment is several pages later on, and I'll pass by it and show you where it is. But essentially, you take the annual mortgage constant and work out what the difference is between the two, and it gives you a number. In this case, the value they got out of the preferential financing was $333,000 of value, less the fee for getting the CMHC, showing an adjusted sale price by $317,000. This is textbook theory. So if this were adjusted for preferential financing, the market cap rate is 6.05%, and with an upside. And I have all this information on Grosvenor and Pembina. There's some really funny stuff in here about Gary Dewar calling one of the purchaser the highest paid employee of the party, but we don't have to deal with that now. 203 Bertrand, which is further along, was a sale not for investment, but a renovation project. And the listing showing the property, which came out after the sale. And again, I'll fix this next time, but the page is 203 Bertrand with the red line down the middle. Shows that this was a newly renovated and maintained. Now, we don't count those as investment sales because the correct way to analyze a cap rate for a renovation sale is look at what they paid, look at what they put into it, and look at what the income was going to be after that. And then it's a weak cap rate, but that's the only one you should consider because they're not relying on the going in income. Because after renovation, it's irrelevant. That's not why it was purchased. However, and that's probably one of the most common errors that most people make on cap rates. We don't use them for our analysis, and I think sometimes the assessor, had they done some due diligence and they looked at it, they probably would have had some doubts about it as well. The listing is shown on the following page. 555 Maryland is probably, I haven't talked to, I think Sussex bought that, and they haven't got back to me on that. I just wanted to confirm the rate to see at 5.74. I don't think it's going to be out of a line much. It appears to be a stable performing property. 677 Maryland is a very strange property. I believe at one point I've appraised it maybe once or twice during this process. Nothing came out of that I would ever testify on, but I didn't really have anything. What I have shown you though are the listings on the site. And the first one comes from 2014 saying the NOI, 204,000. The next one I finally found was a withdrawn listing. This is the one right before the sale that said that the net income was 175,000. On the sale price, that would generate a cap of 7.3%. So we have a statement made by a broker prior to the period saying that it was indicated at 7.3. Now, that's, again, the problem with the mailers. Now, just a note on the reliability of a broker. a broker, an appraiser makes an error like this, this is career threatening. This is serious business. We don't get a slap on the wrist. So that's supportable by people's livelihoods. On the following page, there's a picture listing, and I found this from another source. And so there is also an assumable mortgage, a CMHC, like this, 30 years remaining on this rare CMHC mortgage and the low interest rate environment. And the assumable mortgage is 2.145 million. So we've got a high ratio, low interest mortgage. So if I was you looking at this one further, I would want to see what the benefits are to the favorable financing. But it's certainly not a 5.5% cap rate. 32 Arden is another work in progress. I'm not, some of these I'm expecting to find problems, and some of them are just going to be variances between the years that were relied on for doing the cap or stabilization questions. The following page is a letter sent to Tim Austin, and Colliers objects to their information being used in any way to support their litigation. We don't want to be involved in it because we have a disclaimer, and it's actually made up in really large print. And I put that on my report on page 23. And, you know, the user is required to conduct their own due diligence and verification, not read questionnaires, due diligence verification, if you want to use our reports. I'm presenting to you specifically 510 Burnell, what would be construed as due diligence. The next page is the standard and verification adjustment of sales, and these are just a couple of pages, and I've quoted these earlier, and about all the sales that are generally considered invalid. Sales between relatives or between corporate affiliates is one. So we've had that. Now, what it goes on to say is that specialized questionnaires may be designed for a specific type of property or situation, such as an income-producing property or a property that sells for atypical financing. So the IAAO standard is look into it further, and a lot of these, the ones that they're bringing up, 5.35 sales between relatives or corporate affiliates. If the following factors apply during the follow-up verification, the sale may be considered a valid transaction. So if you have a corporate affiliate, 510 Burnell, if there is, you do the verification. And in this case, we did the verification because we're a brokerage firm and this is what we do. So those are the problems. I think there's a higher standard required to come to this board and talk about cap rates and just look at questionnaires. I don't care about some data analysts sitting in the back room getting questionnaires and thinking you come up with a rate. That's not how we do cap rates. The formula follows on the following pages under financing terms, and under financing terms cash equivalency. This is a textbook section on how one adjusts for preferential financing and the formula I took. And the next set of pages, and I'm going to be careful here because some of this is not proper rebuttal. So I'd ask you not to bother paying any attention to that. But why I'm presenting this is that this was taken verbatim from a Colliers report. And I did review all these numbers, and I did have some minor changes. that are on it, and in future appeals, you're going to see these. But what I do like to point out is that in here, we had numerous renovation projects, four renovation projects out of the 17. And we declare them and don't put weight on them. That's what I wanted to show you. And I think there's one involving review of, 203 Bertrand, which the assessor had indicated was 4.77%. Our analyst put it at using the Collier's method, 5.13%, using the normal method, 5.37%. However, after looking at those numbers, we then discovered that it was a renovation project, so those numbers may not even be applicable themselves. But at time of sale, that was the variance between what the questionnaires showed and what the vendor and purchaser were looking at. There is some listing information that follows. Again, it's not pertinent rebuttal for our properties today. Those were the 2 points I was going to make, and that's the extent of rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Brokus, do you have any questions on Mr. Neufeld's rebuttal evidence?
Yeah, just a couple questions. So, okay, so I'll go through the sales like Mr. Neufeld did. I have questions for some, I don't have questions for others. So 2390 McPhillips, were you involved in that sale in any way?
Our office was, not me personally.
Okay. Can you maybe clarify the extent of what you mean when you say your office was?
Well, there was a confidentiality agreement signed, so I'm going to the source to see if those conditions can be lifted. Your number is incorrect. We know it, but again, we'd like to prove it. So hopefully I'll have that answer later today.
Okay. Okay, so let's see here. Following along, go to 510 Burnell, and I know outside of the hearing, we've emailed about this one, and you made comments that there was a business relationship between the vendor and purchaser. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so just in terms of from a documentation standpoint, I know I asked for documentation late yesterday. Is there anything in your brief like that can confirm that, like from a documentary like proof standpoint? Yeah. Well, I'm just saying like in your brief. So like when you and I leave the hearing and then the board has to make a determination on cap, is there anything they can really put their weight on?
I think that you've got the evidence in your files. This property is managed by Smith Agency, and I've been engaged by Smith Agency on behalf of the owner for the last 12 years to review and appeal if required. The former owner was Elaine Sigerson, and she sold to Smith Agency, who were their property manager. And you'll find that on your title search, assuming you did one. That was the case, and then you'll also see that, for example, in your questionnaires, all the mailers are signed by Smith Agency, Rhonda Martell at Smith Agency.
Okay, so just to be clear, because that's what I was trying to ask you about yesterday. So you're saying that Smith Agency was the property manager for Elaine Sigerson?
Yes. Okay,
that's what I was trying to...
And what I sent you an email yesterday, and I wasn't trying to be abrupt.
No, that's fine.
I was trying to say that when you find these things out, if you want to use the sale, there's a higher degree of due diligence required. That's what I was trying to tell.
Yeah. I was just trying to be clear whether like Elaine and Smith were related. Like if they were
I don't know that because the relationships they have, like I said, they were founded in 1912, and it's interesting. They're self-managing now, and all the properties they manage for other parties are historical. So there could be a family relationship there.
Okay. All right. And then just a little bit more on Burnell here. You mentioned, I see a 3.25% interest rate on page 12, the conventional financing valuation. I don't see on that sheet where you mentioned a preferential rate of 1.95. Does that appear on the Collier's document, or is that something you just typed up on your analysis?
Oh, okay. So the 3.25 and the numbers that follow under are Brian Talio's calculation to see if the projected sale price could achieve financing at 3.25. And you'll see down there, there's some loan to value ratios and some other analysis. And if they conclude that, yes, it's a reasonable rate, they could get financing and still turn about. The later number, Brian told me that he, before the sale occurred, before they closed, they were able to secure better financing. And that kept the price, put the price up. And had it not been for that, then the bid would have been lower. And that was verbal. The documentary trail on issues like that is going to be relatively skimpy. I mean, I guess I like to say we're like specialists who we don't send reports to each other. We're qualified and accredited, and we know what we're talking about. It's not trying to speak myself up, but if one doctor phones another and asks, what do you think that lump is? They're allowed to talk freely, and that's how that came about. He had permission to speak from ownership, and I was able to interview him and ownership.
Okay, so it comes verbally. Okay, just not the last question on this property here on Burnell. I know you mentioned the repair and maintenance. The building is a 1969. When you're looking at the repair and maintenance on a historical standpoint, are you aware that if you recalculated the repair and maintenance using the 2019 actual and used a direct capitalization method, the cap rate would equate 4.68?
It's irrelevant because that's not why it's sold. It's sold because the repairs were done and finished. And the anticipation was that the chronic deferred maintenance had been addressed. The major issue, look at a roof. They're not going to have to consider roof for another 17 years after the set date of sale. And that's the point I was making, is they looked after that. Several $100,000 of work.
Are you aware of what the subsequent year's repair and maintenance has been?
No, I don't have that.
Okay. How do I say this? Would you be surprised if it was different than $1,000 every unit?
I don't know. I mean, it would be post-reference. So what does it matter to us today? It's post-reference. It's post the date of the meeting of the minds of the decision to sell. What was in people's minds at the time was Smith was satisfied. Not only did they know how much was spent, they probably supervised it all. So they knew that it was put in good condition. So there was good anticipation of that.
Okay. So just to be clear, we shouldn't be using anything post-reference.
Well, no, I mean, because if you're talking about market indicators and decisions made, then we have to put the weight on that they deserve. I mean, certain things you can discuss post-reference, certain things you can't. The value indicators are probably something we shouldn't delve into unless there's something there that proves a fact or a theory.
Can I ask the panel a question? I just want to ask the panel in regards to post-reference information. Is there any sort of post-reference information that can be considered when coming up with your decision on value?
Well, I don't think that's a proper question. You should wait for your objections.
Well, no, I'm asking because I've seen panel members object, but they didn't object.
We are bound to consider only the information within the reference period.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So enough of Burnell. Let's see here. I removed the Grosvenor and the other sale, so I'm not going to go into that one. Looking at Bertrand on the mailer, that mailer would be considered post-reference information, would it not?
Which Grosvenor on?
Or sorry, 203 Bertrand on page 23 of the PDF. I know you have pages.
Okay, so
MLS listing.
That's where I had the, it's called property off the market.
That's the MLS listing, the expired listing.
Oh yeah, the expired listing. Yeah, I don't think anything really turns on the expired listing.
Okay, I'll move on from there. I'm not going to do this. And then, so for 677 Maryland, that's a really old sale. Would you not agree? Back in 2014. Just wondering the relevance of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just what I'm trying to look at was the history. It's not just important what was happening in the next listing in 2020, but just look at the building historically. If I looked at the statement that said 175,000 in 2020, and then look at the 14 where they were saying 204,000. What it's saying is that the projections had been based on some history, rather than just hey, I've renovated. Here's my place. Look what I can make. That's what I was trying to get at. But what is important about that, though, is on the 14 listing is the rent control exemption is 5 years. So at the end of that period, they will have gone back to rent control, which then makes you look at the next listing, knowing that it's going to probably fall into the same category, the 175,000, as the rest of the market.
Okay, and then just one last question, just on that Maryland. I believe it's 2 pages beyond what was just referenced, where it says the address, photos, floor plans, maps. It says the listing was closed. It looks like November or rather October 6, 2021. Would that not be post-reference information as well?
Okay. No, the listing was closed then, so it doesn't say when it was open, for one. This particular, I just found this website yesterday, and it's somebody who tracks all the listings on properties, and so they didn't track when that listing came out. But I've got on page, the prior page, it would have been the one marked, what's the listing date on this? February 14th, 2020 on the prior page. And so it was, it could have been part of that listing, and or a private listing that occurred thereafter. So we don't know. And post-reference in this case is what all I was looking here for was the mortgage that was in place that I was bringing forward was got nothing to do with post-reference. It's an in-place mortgage from prior to that period.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions on the rebuttal evidence?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Moretsky?
No, I do not.
Okay, and I don't. And Mr. Brokus, do you have any rebuttal evidence you have submitted or no?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. And is there a need, Mr. Brokus, for summation?
I think we went over it pretty good.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld?
No, other than to say that there may be some comments later on that could refer to all properties under consideration today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Okay, that concludes item number 1. I think we need about a 5-minute break. And so if we can just take 5 minutes only, and so we can get back on track with the remaining items. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to call this meeting back to order. We're now going to deal with item number 2 on our agenda, 507 Corridon Avenue. Mr. Brokus, if you can take us through the property, please.
Mr. Brokus, you're muted.
Okay, one moment. Just let me get this set here. Okay, file 22-1939, roll number 12021554000, 507 Corridon Avenue. It's an apartment. Roll year 2023, April 1st, 2021. Reference date assessed value 610. So request for income information. They've been good handing in their mailers on page 2. Page 3 shows the income value summary. 4 bachelor, 4 1-bedroom. Total units 8, average monthly rent 880 as assigned by the model parameters with our model capitalization rate of 5.1. That's our estimated market values calculated. We've got our income and our rent comparables on page 4. Shows 4 buildings in the area. Comparable 1 is the sister building to the property. A little bit more on that later. And you can see that the average monthly rent falls within the range of the buildings. You also notice that the sister building here, 4 bachelor units, 4 1-bedroom units. Page 5, capitalization rate chart. I'm sure you guys are probably tired of hearing all that by now, so I'll just move on. Capitalization rate. Another chart on page 6. Miss Black excerpts on page 7. And page 8, you can see what this is. The mailer we received, the same owner owns 503 Corridon, so they were submitted together because they have like an identical suite mix, square footage. What we did was we just simply took the income and expenses, cut them in half. So then we were able to make determinations. Like usually, if this isn't possible, non-compliance would be considered. But in this instance, we were able to make the determination, so it wasn't appropriate in my mind to do that. So when I did the calculations on this property, and I should have included my calculations in my workup, but I'll give them to you verbally. So I'll tell you what I did. I did 2 things other than cutting income and expenses in half to assign 1/2 to 507 Corridon. The maintenance and repair looked high to me. 6.4 divided by 16. So it's 2,779 per unit. I stabilized that to 1,500 a unit. It's typically something we see more on the market. I know the applicant has done that as well when the income and expenses are high. So, and I also changed the management. Management is usually is stabilized at 5% of the effective gross income. This management is 7.3%. So when you stabilize that at 5%, you bring the R&M down to 1,500. There's less than, unless something's changed, there's less than $200 difference in net operating income between the applicant and I. So predominantly it's a cap rate issue. I mean, I haven't inspected the property. It's on Corden, popular area to rent, but the cap again was assigned by model as were the income expense parameters. So I'm just going to leave it at that. That's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes. Sorry, I just want to clarify something. You were talking about the combined expenses and income, but you're not aware then of the fact that there's also for some of these utilities only one set of meters.
I did not inspect the property. So
okay. No, it's just that we've had penalty arguments on this property for a long time, and I thought it was all resolved. And you mentioned that you would think that a stabilized repair and maintenance was 1,500, correct?
Yeah, typically that's something that is more typically seen for a property of this age. I know various applicants, including yourself, use that figure.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to hear it again. And the management you felt was high. Now you're using a percentage, but if you have a 8-suite complex, wouldn't it be more expensive to manage than a 30-suite complex?
I haven't seen any reports or data that would indicate that. Typically, when management is stabilized with like unanimously, as far as I know, for applicants, it would always be. It's always brought to 5%. That seems to be the industry standard.
Yeah. Okay. But so no considerations given to the economy of scale. Then would be my question.
That's correct.
Now, in that statement, page 8, do you see any line items for professional fees?
Nope.
Now, it's not unreasonable to think that they employ an accountant at the end of the year to file their returns.
Not at all. I mean, it looks like an accountant did their return here. I don't know if that's rolled into property management.
Well,
it's likely. It's likely.
I was going to suggest to you that could probably be a reason why.
Yeah, and I mean that could very well be the case. So if you broke a little bit out, we're still very close in net operating income.
Okay. And as to the cap rate, all model generated?
Yes.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
Thank you. Mr. Upton?
Oh, you said the maintenance cost you thought was too high? Is that what you said?
Yeah, on a per unit basis, it was almost $2,800. That's significantly more than what we see typically in a building of this vintage. It's running more $1,200, $1,500. I stabilized at $1,500.
Yeah, despite that factor, they declare an NOI on their statements higher than what you have provided.
Well, again, this keep in mind that this statement includes the other building. So the sister building next door. So I had to cut it in half because they have the same suite makeup. So it was a bit tricky to look at. When I first looked at it, that it got me too. I had to go back and review it and realize, oh no, you got to cut it in half and do an analysis that way. So these figures would have to be 50% and then stabilized correctly. Or I restabilize the repair maintenance and property management.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I have no questions. So Mr. Neufeld?
Sorry, I'm just, stupid parking. Yes, so the issue, of course, that Mr. Upton brought up, just make sure we understand that it is two buildings, 503 and 507. The expenses are very, very difficult to separate. And when we looked at this, I looked at them with the property manager, and our real concern here was if we make a guess and estimate them and separate them, then that would be the penalty for providing inconsistent information. And if we give you what we got, whatever is in our possession, and that's what the owner did. This is two properties. 37,900 is actually then $18,900 of income and net income per building, and we've stabilized that upwards to 29,000. And I know that's not written here. And that's based on exactly what the assessor said. We agree sometimes the expenses were extremely high in 2020. And we changed them to $1,500 a door. All the other expenses remain the same. So the NOI is half of $58,405 per door. We thought these would be heard together. And I don't know why they're separate, but $29,202.50 would be our NOI per side, as opposed to the assessor's $31,116. So we are $1,900 apart in NOI, and the other difference is the cap rate. And on this particular issue, we again start at our base rate of 5, took off if I'm on page 2, and the Collier's cap rate is like, when we say 5 to 6%, we're not doing a percentile. We're not saying, oh, there could be some lower than this. They're saying if you meet our definitions, there's nothing lower than this. This is as low as you reasonably can go. There's no sub 5 rate. And then adjusting for the closing costs, I explained that to you for Bornell. Then that brings it up a bit from 5 to about 5.12. Now, the other issue is the building size and configuration. It's 8 units or 16 units, whatever you want to do it. And it's 1 bedrooms and bachelors, which is not a good mix. And it's a little bit older, really good location. The concern there is exactly as demonstrated in the reference year. They have very high maintenance costs. And the reason they do is the concept of a fixed cost or in a single item. If you have one single item to repair 1 year, say you've got to replace a panel, an electrical panel, and I believe that 2019, 2020 was the year that most every building had to upgrade their annunciator panels for fire, for code. If you go to the city permits and search permits, you'll probably find a fire annunciator panel for every multifamily building in Winnipeg. So that's a fixed cost. It doesn't matter if you have 8 units or 800 units. You got 1 panel, and how many doors can you split it by? That's just a bad cap rate risk. So we pulled that out of the expense side and put it where it belongs, into the cap, and stabilize the income, because that's an expense you can't stabilize. So we're at 6%. 487,000, slight increase over 2020, and I think reasonable. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brokus, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just on page 2, if we can go to page 2, please. Okay, so just going down your chart here, I see like a lot of line items where this building is, by your own judgment here, it's hitting the optimal level in your analysis? Access, site size, topography,
Yeah,
coverage configuration, income growth potential, tenant strength, and income stability most notably.
Yeah.
Do you think that like giving it a whole point is a bit too much of a premium by your own system here?
No, I mean, when, again, we have 15 years of history on this building, and what you saw with the 2020 income for R&M is something that repeats every couple of years, where you have a couple of nice years and then you got high R&M costs. And you either stabilize with the R&M in, or you cap it as a risk. Again, we were thinking on a forward-looking perspective. An investor is going to look at the expenses and say, well, okay, this year you had 109,000, and the previous year you were at 80,000. If I budget as we did 88,000, you're going to have to put in some risk for some down years, and because the size of the expense versus the size of the building, it was more substantial. But let's see, we put that at we applied that on the building size, which was 4%, 4 points, which works out to about 0.2% on the cap, higher than optimal. So it wasn't a huge thing. The rest of the quality and condition is just all age-related issues.
Okay. Have you inspected the interior of this property?
I was in it some time ago.
Okay.
Not for a while.
Okay. So you can't confirm if there have been some of those repair and maintenance years that were higher. There weren't any suite upgrades or anything to your knowledge?
Well, every year I go through the property list with the property manager, and we go through problems, and we get the narrative of the issues. And this one's just operations as normal.
Okay. And just
we spend our time talking about 890 McMillan.
Okay. And just one more question. Just in regards to like the overall accessibility to a greater pool of potential investors at this price point, would you not agree that there'd be a greater demand for this type of property, given that smaller investors could get in on the action, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, and of course that's a good point, and so that's a market issue where we have to then consider, were they motivated by the same reasons as everybody else? And you can't assume that just because it's cheaper, you're going to get stupider investors who are more aggressive to chase things because they can afford them. We can't take that into account. We still have to have some uniformity. We have to consider that it's a person acting in their own best interest, as market value says, not somebody who's afraid of missing the boat on a subpar investment. What generally you find in these smaller units is there's sometimes an element of owner occupancy considered, and that's rarely reported. So I think we're just trying to be rather generic in our investment analysis, not anecdotal.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barocas. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
Mr. Moretsky?
No questions.
Just quickly, and I don't want to belabor it, but you talked about age-related issues. Can you just expound on that a little bit, Mr. Neufeld?
Well, yes. If you're built prior to the last National Building Code, which I think was 2007, every time you do something, you're going to be hit with costs and concerns on code upgrades. You're going to have to worry about, can you match the construction style, and also things wear out. So 1953 means that they've probably seen 2 or 3 roof replacements, and the roof style at the time, I think this was probably tar and gravel over wood truss. Now people are using the foam layers. So product changes. Bricks need repointing because mortar only lasts so long, and furnaces wear out. Efficiencies are required, and then if you want to change your furnace, you have to change your delivery. And if you want a really great answer to that, let's wait till we hit 915 Corridon, because this is the same owner's building where we actually did a code review, and it highlights our concern for age-related deficiencies.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and that's all my questions. I've lost my spot. Are we done with 507 Corridon? I think so. Any need for summation on 507 Corridon, Mr. Brokus?
No, thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move along to 825 Corridon Avenue. Mr. Brokus, when you're ready.
Okay, so let me get set here. Okay, so file number 22-2723, 825 Corridon Avenue, roll number 12022627000. It's an apartment, 1955. We've got a 1975 effective year built on it to reflect some work that we have seen that's taken place on the property. 21 suites, 9 outdoor parking spots. I made a recommendation on this property to better reflect market value. I forgot to put the page number in, but if you want to go down to page 5, I've got the recommendation calculations here. So I reviewed the mailer. I took the average revenue because the revenue wasn't quite behaving in a typical fashion. I believe the applicant did do the same thing in regards to their total revenue. So I don't think that's a point of contention in this particular file. So 239,46064. And then there was a few items that I removed that typically aren't included in a calculation of net operating income. I know one of them is definitely going to catch a question or two. That's the first one, property tax appeal, remove that one. That's typically not something that's included in net operating income calculations on a stabilized basis. I've seen other applicants at this panel also similarly remove that expense. Amortization was also removed. Mortgage payment, mortgage principal reduction was pushed back in. And so then I have a total excluded expenses, adjusted administration expenses, total expenses averaged to a net operating income using the modeled capitalization rate. Bad debt is something that usually occurs under revenue, but for time and just ease of understanding for the board, I didn't move it because it was a bunch of detail to do this. So I came up with the amended assessment here of $2,520,000 rounded.
Okay, and that's based on an NOI of 114,806.
That's based on an NOI of 123.
Oh, where am I looking? I'm looking in the wrong spot then. Sorry. Oh, on the average side. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, because the income was
right.
Not behaving typically, and I don't think there's a disagreement on that line item in particular.
Okay, and a cap of 4.9.
The model cap.
Mr. Neufeld, we have a recommendation presented to you. Do you accept the recommendation for the reduced assessment?
having some problems with one or two of these adjustments. And of course, the cap rate. I entirely disagree with the workup on bad debt and property tax appeal. And on principle, I'm not going to accept this.
Okay.
Are legitimate expenses. And
Okay, so we'll ask Mr. Brokus to finish his presentation if he has more to add.
Oh yeah, definitely. Let me go back here to my workup. Sorry, I would put this. Bring up my workup back here. Bad debt shouldn't be removed. It should be something that would be considered. So that was an error of mine. I don't think the applicant is gonna, on principle, accept the recommendation anyway. But if you are going to consider my recommendation in your final decision, you should definitely perhaps take the middle ground of $1,069.99 off of the net operating income to come up with the valuation. That should definitely be included. That was an error of mine. I apologize.
okay.
I'll continue with my presentation.
So do you need to clarify any of those numbers? Is
Yeah,
that
sure.
still,
I'll
like I am
do
trying
that.
to follow along, but I can't do the math in my head.
Yeah, okay, I'll do that quickly. I don't think it's going to be accepted, but I'll just do it. I'll just leave it as an option there for the panel. So the net operating income of 1,2,3,4,6,9.42. If I take the middle ground of 1,069.99 off of that, the resulting net operating income for my revised recommendation will be $122,399.43. And when you use a 4.9 cap on that, that would be $2,498,000 for my revised recommendation. And I can keep going from here if you like, just in my presentation.
So can you just repeat the NOI number?
Yes, not a problem. That would be $122,399.43.
Okay.
Mr. Neufeld, does that make a difference?
Well, it's it's kind of an insult to my profession. I got to tell him. I keep telling him that the tax appeal fees are a legitimate expense. But I was redoing my calculations here, and I'm noting that that for some strange reason, our workup contemplated a lower rental value than previous years, which is puzzling. I probably would not have stabilized it as low myself. So that puts my NOI up closer to the assessors. Let's just say that we can move on and argue about cap, and I'll just express my indignation at not including the property tax fee and just deal with the cap. If that's okay with the assessor?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so I made the rec. So I'm not going to really touch on the model workup other than the 4.9 cap. That's in dispute. The rent comparables are just comparables in the neighborhood, but again, I consider the actual, so I'm not going to put weight on that. Just on the property tax appeal standpoint, I'm not trying to be insulting in any sort of way, but I know that a lot of the times, like a lot of these properties, they go to the municipal board a lot, and reductions are received there as of late most often through some form of agreement, or if it goes to a hearing, often there's a reduction that way. We don't see those very often being reported on income and expense statements. So it's really hard to totally quantify the gain. Like, I know when it comes to the property tax appeal fees, the appeal's done, the decision is made by the panel, and that's reflected on the taxes going forward, and that's what's reported. But there's also another level to it where a further reduction is reached, and that's not something that we see on mailers. I haven't seen any other, from what I recall, I know other applicants don't include this fee. So I didn't include, ultimately it's not very much in regards to looking at the net operating income of 825 Corden. So in terms of coming up with that recommended valuation, it really didn't play a strong role, whether it was in or not. So for the purpose, I'm just going to leave it there. Our cap rate chart, you've already heard it to death today. And then you have the mailer at the end here. I included 3 years, and you can see it's quite a detailed mailer. I combed through this, and I removed the expenses I didn't feel that were applicable. You notice that the, where does it say here? On page, need an example, property tax appeal, page 10. They didn't budget anything. They spent $24.70, but they didn't budget anything. So it's not something that they expect all the time. Not every property appeals. So wasn't a big number, and I didn't include in my recommendation. So I'm going to leave my presentation as is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Neufeld, do you have questions?
Yeah, how did you get from an actual year 1955 to an effective year of 1975?
Oh, okay. There would have been some sort of.
There would have been, or do you know? That's all.
I'll look it up right now. I'll
Okay.
put the comments up. But it would have been done. Let's see here. Is declared an inspection overlay. I got some notes going back in 2011, saying that the building has had some renovations. I would have tried to find pictures. I typically include pictures when I can find them, but I wasn't able to if they're not in the brief. But we have notes indicating windows, kitchen, bathroom, flooring, etc. So that's why there's a boost to the effective age.
Those are my questions.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Moretsky,
I have no questions.
can you just expound a little bit more on the 4.9 cap? It's a low cap, the lowest we've seen this morning. And so if you can just give me a sense of why the model has generated a 4.9 cap. I'm looking at the city's chart, and it's, pretty close to the 20th percentile. So
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm not a modeler, so I can only hypothesize. It's on Corden. It's a great area. The applicant themselves have it at 10 out of 10 on their own chart. We have record of renovations being done within the past 15 years. So it looks like we have record of it being in good condition. It hasn't been just kind of maintained as per the notes. But other than that, I can't really expand on it. It's 21 one-bedroom units, renovated building on Corden.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Neufeld.
Yes. Okay. You already heard what my thoughts on the expense of a tax appeal, but what the assessor said, there, to some degree, I understand. You don't budget for it because you never know what the board's going to say. You're not going to guess that it's going to happen. you just take it as it happens. And they don't always match the year because, as the assessor says, we're cleaning up appeals from 2018, 2016, and costs are incurred and credits are granted. And it's something you might consider if the expenses are very large, then you would want to see some stabilization. But they're definitely an expense. The textbook quote I put in there is very just clear and right to the point. It does impact the revenue and expenses. It's not an option. We're prepared for today to accept the NOI only because I noticed that I wouldn't have personally have stabilized the income at 234,000, and I think that's a mistake. So we'll take the assessor's number for now, 122,399. In regard to, so the only concern there is the cap rate where we differ, and as I've said earlier, nothing exists below 5% because you can't get loans on that. It's you're dealing with creative financing, expecting someone to walk in with a load of cash and buy your site and be happy with poor returns. It just doesn't happen in the real world. The issues that we'd identified from the Collier's cap, where the bottom rate is 5 with our closing costs, that brings it up to basically 5.15. The parking stalls, it's low on the parking stalls, although I wouldn't have been as negative on this. 12 parking stall for 21 units, it wasn't zero, so they do have a few, and it is cordon. So I think that number could be a bit softer. We wouldn't have brought it down two of these basis points. Then the other factors, the year built, although the assessor has this concept of how they establish effective age. I disagree on windows. My house is built in 2003, and we've replaced 75% of the windows because seals blow, and so does the weather stripping. That doesn't make the house newer. It's just one of those ongoing things. As a matter of fact, the most efficient windows we've ever seen in our market was the old style, where you had a single pane sealed and then you put your storm one on top because there was no heat transference on it. On the panes, the worst were those aluminum sliders because the cold transferred through the aluminum. But perhaps it's in good condition. So I'd actually think personally, I wouldn't be as aggressive as high as 6%. I had just penciled in probably 5.75% would be my opinion. And I'm not the person who wrote this, but so we're going to accept 122,399 as NOI. It's on the table, and then looking for a cap of 5.75%, which is a value of 2,128,678, 2,128,678, which I would round to 2,129,000. And there's a minor error on this page 1. The 2020 assessment was just agreed to in case management. I don't recall what the final number was, but that was appealed and it has gone lower than that. That's what I had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Barocas?
Okay, yeah, just you have your, on page 2, you have your optimal cap rate is 5%. You've lowered your cap rate to this one up 0.75 of a point higher. Can you give us an example of, in Winnipeg, like what in your mind like a 5 cap would be, or a 5.25 cap?
Yeah, it's going to be a newer, larger facility with control over their own parking, whether it's high rise or walk up. Those are the key factors. So somewhere where you've managed to offload your utilities to the tenants, because if you offload your utilities, you've taken out the risk of high heating bills in the winter that'll kill your bottom line. Ones that and rent control is just kind of a wild card there. Some people think that you're out of rent control is better than being in. I probably couldn't factor that, but if I had to think of the lowest cap we've seen that was sold was 500 Portage, and it was all reported the wrong way, but that was in that ballpark in the very low fives, because it had a lot of units, control over parking, demand from the university, as an investment property. And then when you get outside of investment motivation, then you just got St. Boniface, where people want to buy there because they want to live there, not investment. But you've seen some there that are hitting the fives.
Okay, and just to stay on the point a little bit. So for a newer build where you have a control over parking,
well, it's the expense side you should really focus on. If you've managed to offload your utilities to the tenants, separate metering, it's a much more stable investment.
Okay. And so for those newer buildings, you wouldn't make an adjustment for income growth potential?
For what?
For those newer builds that you're describing, those fives, you wouldn't make an adjustment to income growth potential?
It would depend, because there's a couple of newer built ones that have hit the top of the market, and so people go in and project. They say, well, if we're getting $1,500 a month, maybe next year we should get $1,600, and I think that there's some sensitivity barriers there, so I don't think you have anywhere to go. So I would consider that. If you're looking for income growth potential, you're going to be lower rents and the ability to increase them.
Okay. All right, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
What was the comment you made on the 2020 assessment? I missed that.
We had written it at $2,501,000. That was resolved by agreement a couple of weeks ago, and it was lowered, and I don't have the number with me.
Okay, so that number is not correct then?
No, it's not. It's not.
Let's see. Okay, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
And neither do I. Mr. Brokus, would you like to do summation?
No, thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
We're fine, thanks.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 4 on our agenda, 915 Corridon Avenue.
Okay,
Mr. Brokus?
Would it be okay if I just take a 2-minute break very quickly?
You bet. Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We'll resume our meeting at item number 4, 915 Corridon Avenue. Mr. Brokus, when you're ready.
Okay, one moment. Okay, file 22-1943, roll number 1202-304-5100, 915 Corridon Avenue. Reference date April 1st, 2021. Roll year 2023, assessed value $4,701,000. Actual year built 1913. It's got an effective year built on it as well. 36 outdoor parking spots, 60 suites. I've got a recommendation on the property here. $4,294,000. Again, I should have put the page for ease of reference, but if you scroll down, Attach here to page 5. It's based on their most recent mailer, the income and expenses that they reported. Took them all into consideration. I stabilized the management at 5% and net operating income 221,147. I think we're within about $2,000 from the applicant on my recommendation. So it's predominantly a cap rate issue. I used just the modeled cap on this one. I know there had been a fire previously. I believe I did inspect this place with the applicant years ago. It has been repaired since. You can see the pictures on page 12 showing the work that's been done. So it's not 1913 on the inside, and an effective age was applied to the property in order to bring the model, in an attempt to bring the model in line with what they're actually reporting on an effective gross income basis. Again, we're getting on a lot in time here, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Recommendation, 4,294,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, there's a recommendation there's a recommendation 4294000. Do you accept the recommendation?
Well, I agree on the income, the NOI, and perhaps we can just spend a little bit of time on the cap rate.
Okay, then you proceed with your questions of Mr. Brokus, please.
Thank you. Is the effective year built based on the repair after the fire? The change?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, can you get an above guideline RTB increase on an insurance claim?
I don't have any experience in that.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying, when the previous property, if you said there was some renovation and some capital investment in it, you would expect that it would show up in the income, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like looking at our gross potential, it looks like we're pretty close to what they're reporting.
Yeah, no, that's yes. It's just a general question. Now, in the scope of repair, do you know, did they repair the foundation?
Let me look this up. I don't believe so. I don't believe they dug down. Let me see.
No, or the framing?
I don't have that answer.
Okay. All right. So you don't know the scope of what was done. Those are my questions. Thanks.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
Okay, and I have no questions, so the floor is yours, Mr. Neufeld.
Yes, he's correct. A few $1,000s off the NOI building this size. That's fine. We don't need to debate that. It's just the cap rate issue. And, I was asking these questions because the residential tenancy branch allow above guideline increases if you invest in your property, because the concept is they want to give people a motivation to put capital into their buildings and give them a way to recoup it. To my knowledge, that doesn't include insurance claims because there was no capital required. And this was an insurance claim repair. So, and just to show you my point, in 2011, 10 years ago, the NOI was 177,000, and on income of I think it was 400 and, so I was just looking at the number here, 421,000. So 10 years later, it's gone up marginally. So there's been no upside, no above guideline increase. It's just, and that's when, you know, the concept of a changing your effective year shouldn't be viewed remotely. Like, I have a better building, I should be able to rent more. There's still a board out there that approves increases. And where it's seen on the income, then you can use it. So this one hasn't seen it after the fire. And incidentally, the fire repair cost was 1.4 million, I should say. And I think that was provided to the city. So as with any building built in 1915, the frame wasn't changed, the foundation wasn't changed. Elements of the envelope had to be repaired because they were fire damaged, and there was a fair amount of required code upgrades. I was involved in this issue with the insurance company and the owner because there was a great debate on code upgrades. And eventually they got done in the repair, and I don't know who ended up. I think it was the insurance company had to end up paying for them under the policy, but it was a very interesting proposition of how they got. And there's some rebuttal information on some of the work we did at the time for the fire, as well as pictures. So when we look at this in a cap rate is, sorry, I was looking up, I gotta look at mine. As I said, I didn't prepare this, and I think I may disagree with some of these issues, but I think the cap should be at 6%. And of course, there's no parking on these in this. It is older. Nothing's changed except the interiors have changed, but the frame, the foundation have not changed. The damage, quality and condition isn't the major issue. It's income growth potential. You did not get, most apartment owners can get their income bumped if they invest capital, and the returns are better than what they were getting in the past. In this case, they don't have the opportunity for it. So I would label this as income growth potential is limited. And quality and condition are not bad, but it's the inability to earn more. So I think the 6% is reasonable. And I do have some in the rebuttal I filed just to show you what was done. That's my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Barocas?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Upton?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Moretsky?
No questions, thank you.
And I have no questions. So, Mr. Neufeld, you indicated you have rebuttal evidence.
Yes, there was two documents that were sent.
If I can just ask our secretary where we can find these.
They are labeled in the same spot. Item number 4, rebuttal applicant code compliance, and item 4, rebuttal applicant pictures.
Okay.
Directly below the applicant's brief.
Okay. I have the pictures.
And then document above the pictures, document should be labeled applicant code compliance.
I don't see anyway on my screen the whole title. And I don't know how to make it bigger, but that's okay. Okay, I got it.
Second number,
yep.
1, 2, third
yep.
item number 4.
Yep, I have it now. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Neufeld.
Okay, well, maybe I'll start with the pictures. These are from my personal inspection after the fire. The first page has got some pipes wrapped in some white stuff. And so that is required a cleanup there. It's all been removed. The other pictures show what the condition was like after the fire, and the second page shows the panels. And now the degree that they had to work on the interior was they had to redo the interior partitioning, but not the framing, and all the wiring had to be redone. Now, earlier, going to the second document, there was a question of, what's the difference between a building that's showing its age, and the biggest problem are code upgrades. In this case, because it had to be repaired, the code upgrades were required, and we engaged, for the purpose of the insurance claim, a contractor to just detail the code issues and the approximate budget cost for fixing all of this. And so this is what all buildings who age are faced with. There's a whole list of things like fresh air, aluminum wiring, undersized pipes, the barrier-free issues, and now standardized insulation and fire suppression systems and wiring panels. Now, it's fair to say that this was repaired, and they did spend some money on it, and it has now been brought up to code. The issue on this building now is the income's frozen because of the way it was done. But this also shows what every other building we're talking about today has to face to understand what an age-related deficiency is the code. That's really why I wanted to show that. Thank you. That's all I had to say today.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Brokus, do you have questions on Mr. Neufeld's rebuttal evidence?
No, so just to confirm that this work has been done and completed as per the reference they were looking at today for the property?
Well, not to the specs in this report. I just found another report you've got it in your files. Mr. Lucky dug it out, and it's the actual detailed permit. It outlined most of the stuff that's in the report, and then you'll note that our estimate was $2 million, but the actual cost came in at $1.4 million, and I believe all the code was done.
Okay, thank you.
And no structural work was done.
Okay.
No further questions? Okay, thank you. Mr. Moretsky? Mr. Moretsky, do you have questions on the rebuttal? Mr. Upton? Thank you. Mr. Brokus, did you have rebuttal evidence?
No rebuttal.
Okay, and is there a need for summation on this property?
No, thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll now move to item number 5, 720 Dorchester. Mr. Brokus, when you're ready.
Okay. Okay, 1 moment. File number 22-3077. Roll number 12022527000 Dorchester. Assessed value $1,772,000. Again, it's an apartment. We don't have any effective year built on it. The actual is 1912. To reflect any significant renovations that we've tracked. Page 2, request for income information, looking good. Page 3 shows the income value summary modeled with our modeled rents and our model cap of 5.2. Model expense ratio, which generates our estimated market value of $1,772,000. It's an older property, just to make things expedient as possible, unless something has changed. We're about $1,000 apart in net operating income. So I believe this is another cap rate issue. Rent comparables are taken from the neighborhood. 1 and 4 are newer. I didn't do a detailed analysis on this so much in terms of the rent comparables. On page 5, I did do a review on the property, looking at the mailer. I started with the 2020 mailer, which was year-end May 31st, 2020. And one thing I noticed, or on page 5 here, is that the repair and maintenance was much higher. So I looked at it on a 5-year basis, see how it fluctuated. Came out to $1,835.92 per unit. It's an older building. I mean, it's higher, but it's not outside of the scope of reasonability. And so then I just restabilized the management and came up with a net operating income just to see how that value calculated compared to our modeled assessment. Again, this isn't, I'm not asking for an increase or anything like that. We're close on the NOI. This was just some additional analysis that I was able to do. So cap rate charts 6 and 7, 8 is our excerpts, 9 to 13 are our income and expense mailers, where I got the R&M from, so you can verify that. And then I was able to find an online rental advertisement for the property, and there's no rent, I don't believe, on this. Good. And it just shows, because we are looking at a 2023 physical, it does note, even though I would maybe dispute the completely part, large 4-room, 1-bedroom, lower level apartment right in the heart of Corden Village, no emails, blah, blah, blah. Completely renovated, freshly painted, upgraded. Renovations include flooring, appliances, upgraded kitchen, washroom, so on and so forth. You guys can read that. So then I got some pictures from the ad, from the exterior. It doesn't look like the exterior has been done. So again, sometimes when they say completely renovated, that's a bit of a stretch. So pictures are a better way of getting an idea when available what is actually going on the inside. Looks like at least this unit, this particular guy is trying to rent. The flooring's been done. It's not a 1913 kitchen. It's also not like a granite marble countertop with fancy cabinets. It's just, it's been maintained and upgraded by the looks of it. Likewise, the vanity in the bathroom. So we don't have an effective age on this property. We're close in regards to net operating income. Cap is modeled. I didn't make a change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yeah, so page 3, you said this is all done by the model?
Yes, I believe so.
So I'm just curious about something here. Actual year, effective year 1912, you're indicating a 5.2% cap rate. The last property had an effective age of 1973 at 1.15%. So for those 61 years, are you saying that 0.5% is the difference?
You know, that's a very good question. I wish I could speak to that better, but I am not a modeler, so I'm not involved in that's the formula that they come up with. But that's a valid question.
Okay, and on this workup that was done on page 5, so this was just your analysis of the actual mailer that you came in at 95,000, and was your only adjustment repairs and maintenance?
No, I did the management as well.
Management, okay. But you didn't touch professional fees?
No, I did not.
What if there was a tax appeal fee in there?
Oh, I don't know. Well, if it was broken apart, then I suppose I'd have to take a look at it.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
No, I don't think I have. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
And thank you, neither do I. Mr. Neufeld?
I think we're very similar in the NOI, so it's not a major issue. It's a cap rate again. And on our page 2, this workup's done in our office, and we've got a lot of people there who, not a lot too, and I do supervise them. I don't look at them all individually, and my take on this is that if I was looking at this, I probably wouldn't see this as high as 6.75. And I think the reason is that there's an upside here. This is probably a property that would get a lot of interest on above guideline increases, with a bit of capital put into it that would increase its earning potential. So it's true that the repair costs differ every year, and you can see the age-related deficiencies. How the repair and maintenance varies dramatically, but probably there would be a lot more interest. And the other reason is that just the part of the city that it's in, it's a quieter street in that area. It would probably cap a bit lower than this. My opinion would be want to see if I'm on the right path here. Yeah, I would personally think that probably you should be seeing a number of about 6.25% more than 6.75. And the only thing there is the major issue is still the age and the expenses that just go up and down. And I think when I was, they haven't succeeded at offloading their utilities to the tenants. So that's another negative factor. So you get a bad winter, your utilities go up, your gas goes up. So that number, rather than 1,361,000, I get 1,470,272, 1,470,272, rounded to 1,470,000.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Is that your presentation?
Yes, it is.
Mr. Barocas, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just looking, just there's some clarification, just looking at the management expense, and there's a caretaking expense too. Just for my knowledge, would you ever roll the caretaking into the management and stabilize it at 5% or anything like that?
That's something that the individual operator does, and this is was a family investment where the son took over the parents' estate, and they manage it rather informally. You can tell by page 3 that it's not a team of accountants working on this. So they're going to have a different style. But again, this is what they file with their income tax returns. So it's accurate. I don't think it's categorized the way you'd probably like to see it.
Okay, fair enough. The pictures I was able to come up with a description said they did some renovations. Do you have any knowledge in regards to the extent of what renovations were been done?
I don't know. I don't think there's been any extensive renovations here on this property.
Okay, fair enough. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barocas. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
Yes, at one point you said the effective age was set differently at 1978 or something.
No, I was just bringing that up. That the other property was changed in 1973, the 915 corridor from 1913, and yet the cap rate on this one, which remained at 1912, is virtually identical. So I think there's an error in the cap rate application by the city assessor. They're saying that 60 years is the same cap rate. That was my point.
Despite all the changes due to the fire and so on.
Well, that was the
The
previous
effective
property.
age now would be.
That was the
retired in
previous
1912.
property had the fire. And
I'm sorry.
they changed the effective age to 1973 after the repairs.
Right, but this one now, would you change the effective age on this one or?
No, I don't think so. I think what there's been is relatively minor work done on it, and I agree with the assessor. They were just keeping up with the times. When it came time to replace the cabinet because it wore out, they replaced it. There, not a lot of work's been done in it. Lots of deferred maintenance, and so on one side, deferred maintenance means ongoing high repair costs. On the other side is you have the capability of putting in some capital and maybe getting some greater returns. So that's why like the last year we did this, you can see we put it in the last decision, they capped it at 7%. And I now I'm saying 6.25. So I think there's been I think we're being reasonable here.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moretsky, do you have any questions?
I do not.
And neither do I. Mr. Brokus, is there a need for summation?
No, thank you.
Mr. Neufeld?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 6, 162 Lilac Street. Mr. Brokus, when you're ready, you can start us off.
Okay. File number 22-3079, roll number 120-2293-3000-162 Lilac Street. It's an apartment originally built in 1913. We've got an effective year built in 1945 on it. 15 suites, 10 outdoor parking spots. Page 3 shows our modeled workup with our 5.2% cap to come up with our estimated market value of $1,589,000. Rent comparables are found on page 5, falls within the range. The modeled net operating income, $82,623. If you flip to my page 8, you'll see that the actual net operating income in their most recent year here is $79,605. So we're pretty close in that regard. We're about just over 3,000 higher. So we're a little bit higher. One thing you should know is the repair and maintenance listed on a 15-unit basis comes up to $2,564 per unit. That's pretty high. If we went to 2,000 a unit, it would bump the actual net operating income $8,460 and would put us above our modeled net operating income. When you're flipping through the pictures at the end of the brief here, you see it looks like there has been some work that's been done to it. The exterior looks good. The cabinets look very similar to the last property. So this is where the effective age is coming from. So even if we were to stabilize at a higher than normal repair and maintenance per unit at 2,000, it would boost the most recent year's actual above the model. And looking at it only on a 1-year basis, it's likely that the $2,564 per unit isn't something they would forecast over the long term. So I didn't make any changes. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes. So this one, you've got a year built, 1913, effective year, 1945.
Mm-hmm.
And we got the same cap rate again, 5.2%. So does it change at all on the age?
Well, in regards to the last property,
Well, we've had 3 in a row, all built 1912, 1913. Effective dates vary 1912, 1973, 1945, and they're all getting the same cap rate. Does it really matter?
it would appear that I'm not a modeler, but it would appear that the for the pass-through properties, the actual year built, at least in this area, is what is being weighted most heavily.
But we don't know that because we can't see the model though, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And you mentioned something about repair and maintenance, and I'm wondering, do you have a different repair and maintenance budget in mind, considering, for example, this one has more 2-bedroom units and also features sunrooms? Would that impact that repair and maintenance number?
Maybe the sunroom aspect, but like I said, if we made it 2,000 a unit, which is, I mean, 1,500. I know you and I have done that a couple of times. Even if we bumped it to 2,000 a unit, thinking about the sunroom, we would be boosting the NOI. The actual reported NOI would be higher than what the model's saying. So I think we're okay for our NOI on this one.
Those are my questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Moretsky, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just noticing that the average monthly rent per unit is $955 on this apartment. That seems to be higher than a lot of the other similar aged apartments that we looked at this morning. Would that be an accurate observation?
Yeah, but it's still a lot lower than, in terms of a reflection, how that reflects on a potential, or rather even an affected. If you look at their total revenue that they're collecting on page 8, it doesn't look like we're overstating. We're not overstating it. The model's not overstating the income in relation to what they're actually reporting. Sorry. We've been talking a lot, so I'm starting to lose it a bit.
Yeah, I hear you. Okay, no questions. No more questions for me.
Thank you, Mr. Moretsky. Okay, Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready.
Thank you. In this instance, our NOIs are apart by about $4,000, which is it's a large enough difference to pay attention to. We're using the actuals, and once again, we've taken stabilized income, and you'll notice that this one goes up and down. So that's not really a market feature. That's more like a vacancy issue, because there's only 15 units. You could have one unit empty for a month and it impacts the income in a greater amount than a larger building. So we average that and average the expenses, and so we see $78,654 is a very reasonable NOI. This is the same ownership as the last property, so it's the same statement that you're looking at, type of statement you're looking at that they prepared, and the same issues with deferred maintenance will come up. But incidentally, also, I think the same upside potential. So I think that there's an upside potential. So I would suspect a little bit better cap rate on this, much like the other one, because there would be interest in this property because you can do something with the income with capital, probably about 6.25. And on my income, that works out to 1,257,024, 1,257,024, rounded to 1,257,000, and that's actual income at 6.25%. The concern, like I said, a lot of these concerns on the high repair costs may be the need for some capital, and I think in this case the capital would justify. I think you could probably get better rent in this neighborhood if we're better. So that, and I'm not predicting that that's going to happen. I'm simply saying that that's the way an investor would think when looking at this site. You'll note that last cycle, it was capped at 7%. And again, that was higher than the average. Both of these were higher than the averages going out there. And that remains the issue. And I think we are proposing a very fair number. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Brokus, do you have any questions?
Just looking at page 2, do you have any details? Like, it looks like they've done some exterior work, windows, potentially the roof. the exterior brick. Do you have any details in regards to that at all?
No, I don't. To me, it looks like those windows, the sunroom windows appear to have been newer units by the look of the picture. I don't have my other printed files with me, then I'd have a better comparison on that. But again, this is a repair as needed project. That's the best way to describe it. No major capital that I know of.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Mr. Moretsky?
No questions for me.
Thank you, and me either. Mr. Brokus, a desire for summation?
No, but can I take 20 seconds to let my dog in because she's going crazy outside?
Of course.
Okay, she'll appreciate that. Thank you.
Excuse me, we're live?
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting back to order. We're now on agenda item number 7, 566 McMillan Avenue. Mr. Brokus, when you're ready.
Thank you very much. File number 222589, roll number 12021817 566 McMillan Avenue. 2,011,000 is the assessed value for 2023. It's a 59 apartment with no effective age applied to a 22 suites. Page 3 shows our modeled valuation, again with the 5.2 cap. Model parameters in terms of assigning gross potential rent and expense ratios, how the estimated market value is calculated. Page 4 shows the comps that are in the area. Here where it falls within the range. It's an even split between 1 and 2 bedrooms. I didn't make an adjustment at this point of my research. I did an analysis on page 5 of the subject property income and expenses. So what I am going to do though is I'm going to make a verbal recommendation on this property here. One moment. 66 million. So I did a workup stabilizing the management at 5%. The repair and maintenance was 1750.82. You know, it's not a heck of a lot higher than the 1500 we typically see. So with the workup at our modeled cap rate, it comes into a value of 1,921,000 rounded. The modeled assessment was about 4.69% difference. Over a static NOI, that's about a quarter point. So I'm going to make the recommendation. I think there's a big enough difference in value where a recommendation is warranted on this. So I'm going to recommend that value, 1,921,000 rounded, based on the workup on page 5.
So that reflects the 99,876 NOI and a 5.2 cap?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Neufeld, do you have a recommendation in front of you?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't think I can accept it. I'd have to check with the owner, and so let's just carry on.
Okay. All right. Mr. Brokus, do you have anything to add to your presentation?
I wasn't able to find pictures, but the mailer is at the end of my brief. So my recommendation was based on the actuals there. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yes, on the page 5 workup you did, I know is the only adjustment you made from the actuals is you reduced the management fee?
That's correct.
Now, why didn't you not consider professional fees or office supplies and put those in?
Yeah, I see your point. That could have been built into what would be considered the the management. So on a yearly basis, you would expect it not to be zero indefinitely.
No.
It's obvious. It's a valid point.
Yes, okay, thank you. Because, not everybody makes their statements up the same way, right? They probably just bury professional fees and office into management.
Could be, and going forward, that it might be something that, if we're going to put management at 5, but there's nothing in professional and office, especially on an ongoing basis, there would have to be something there out of just reasonability.
Right, okay, well, that was my only concern about, that was my major concern about your recommendation. And then obviously, another of these 5.2% cap rates for 1959. So it seems like one size fits all.
The model seems to be giving this area, at least today, for these properties, the 5.2.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moretsky, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Mr. Upton?
No, thank you.
Okay, and I have no questions. So Mr. Neufeld, over to you.
Yes, I thank the assessor for attending to that and answering forthright. Everybody does their statements differently, and you'll note that we're going back to the last one was Atlas, this one is back to Smith Agency, and this is the way they do their books. So everything, expenses gets lumped into property management and administration. So you'll note that they don't show accounting fees or professional fees or office supplies. It's all put into one. So I think our number and the difference makes the value our number of NOI of $94,499. I think that's more accurate. And as to the cap rate, again, I don't think 5.2% fits everybody. Briefly, the major issues on this one is it's in better condition than the last ones we looked at. We would be putting this at about 5.75% in that ballpark. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barocas, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
Okay, and neither do I. Mr. Barocas, is there a desire for summation?
No, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Neufeld?
No.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to our final property, 223 Nassau Street South. Mr. Barocas, when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. File 22-2596, roll number 1202-1815000, 223 Nassau Street North. Assessed value $933,000 for 2023. It's a 1959 11 suites, 7 outdoor parking. Give me good handing in their mailers. Page 3 shows the workup. It's 11 one bedroom, average monthly rent $807.99. Modeled everything. The net operating was $47,562. Just to make it expedient, I believe we're within $2,000 of the applicant in regards to net operating income, so I'm not going to dwell on this. Very long. The comparables are found rent-wise on page 4. You can see that we're at the bottom of the range. Comparable 1 does feature a 2-bedroom unit, which was skewed upwards. Comparable number 4 says it's got a 3-bedroom unit. That being said, we're still at the bottom of the range. Cap rate evidence, and one thing I do have to ask you to disregard is the mailer that was included is from December 2021, and that's post-reference. That wasn't intentional. That was just me slapping briefs together, and I just clicked the wrong link. Couldn't find a picture of the outside, or the inside rather, but the last page shows a picture of the outside. It looks like, well, I can't really tell about those windows, really, the condition that they're in or the age. But it was all modeled on this one, and unfortunately in my own brief here, I don't have a 2020 mailer to bounce off of. But we're close in terms of net operating income, so it is cap unless anything's changed. That's my evidence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brokus. Mr. Neufeld, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just again, this one, 1959, 5.1%. Again, this is a model issue.
It's the cap rate is produced by the model.
Yeah. Okay. Although your statement, page 8, is post-reference, not a number issue here, but you'll note that there are no professional fees and office fees. Again, this is the same owner as the last property. So you note that this is how they do things, but there's some merit. Okay.
Again, it's post-reference, so I can't talk about it.
No, I understand. Okay, that's all I really wanted to ask you about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Upton, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, thanks.
Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
Thank you, and neither do I. Mr. Neufeld, when you're ready.
I think some, we're agreeing too much here. We need to fight some more, but I get his statement about the income because I'm looking at it and I've noticed something very strange, that 2020 incomes are down from 2019. And I hadn't really noticed that till right now that was there a problem in the market in multifamily? I never suspected so. I figured that during the COVID times we wouldn't see that sort of loss, but I guess there has been some. We're going to rely on I don't think there's a problem with the assessor's number because I see that we were using a number that was all based on 2020, and I would have preferred to have seen, all based on, was averaged out. I would have preferred to focus a little bit more on 2020, and it's actually overall higher. So I was going to change mine to 47,562 because I don't want to fight about that. I just want to argue about the cap rate, which is, again, it's the same issue. And there was some merit in what the assessor said about people looking for smaller investments and being able to afford them. But that's not an investment parameter. That's an anomaly. And you will not get equity if you chase the guy who can afford to buy it. I tend to look at a small unit as a risk of lower returns because of the lower number of doors, and that's the theory in the concept of valuation is to follow the theory and explain the anomalies, not rely on them. So I'm just taking the 47,562, and I see nothing wrong with the 6%. And that gets us to 792,700, 792,700, rounded 793,000 at 6%. And anytime we talk about cap rates, I also want to, I don't want to come across and say this is the cap rate. This is what it's supposed to be. I changed a couple before because I thought that they were a little too high. And anytime you quote a cap rate, as I said, go look at the chart that I provided. And if you disagree with something, make a modification. And each of those points represents 0.05 on the rate. Nothing here is gospel. These are just estimates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Neufeld. Mr. Brokus, do you have any questions of Mr. Neufeld's presentation?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Upton?
No questions.
Mr. Moretsky?
I have no questions.
Thank you very much. So we've heard all the items scheduled, and this hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much.